Hosted by Young Ty. Co-host Robert Go. You're listening to the Voices of the Underground podcast. Voices of the Underground.
What's going on, Rob? How's it going, man?
Not too bad, man. We are in the middle of festival season. I'm excited. I caught Ultra. That some of those sets were really good. Saw some music trends that these guys are going to be setting for the rest of the year. We have EDC in apparently 3.5 weeks, according to your story. So EDC week's going to be pretty fun. I'm probably going to be a wreck. Full disclosure. I haven't, it's funny because I lived out there, right? And I would go every year. I haven't been back to EDC since 2018 or EDC week. And I'm leaving it all in the field, Ty. So I don't know how you're going to figure it out, but I'm leaving it out there.
It's going to be interesting because this will be my first EDC as well, and just being in Vegas in general. But enough of that. We have a special guest on this episode, and it's a techno guy finally doing a different genre for once, Rob.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I'm excited. I like the perspectives he's going to give us. I have a feeling Hardwell's going to come up in this conversation right off the rip. So I'm excited to see kind of like, the trends and or how that's kind of affecting his genre and so forth. So yeah, it's going to be good, man. I'm fired up. And he's American. And we got American Tyler.
Yeah. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podcast, Sam Wolfe. How's it going, buddy?
Thank you very much. It's going fantastic. American, land of the free, home of the Whopper. Let's do it.
Yeah. I've had a few. I can attest that is true. I've had a few. You don't keep this figure by not eating that stuff.
I love it. What's going on, boys? The lads. I'm here with the lads. We're chopping it up.
Yeah. How's life for you, man? Now you've done some festivals this year, right? You've already kicked off your schedule already. How's traveling going for you?
Yeah, everything's fantastic. It's interesting because I still work full time. And then I'm trying to build this music career, this music brand. So finding the balance between full-time work and then basically, I'm in a very fortunate position where, I probably should be investing more into a 401k, but I look at a lot of my disposable income as investment capital to build the dream, the brand and whatnot, because, when I first got into this thing, I thought that, I'll just make a couple bangers and people will play them and support it. And then, you're going to blow up, and it's not that easy. It's you have to build a brand. You got to build a brand, and that requires time, energy, money, spending time on ads, making sure that the branding's on point. That's something that we can jump into a whole lot because that's something I'm a very audio guy, but I'm not as much a visual guy. And I think that's something that a lot of artists are not, where, having distinct visual kind of association with your brand, whether that's just the outfits that you're wearing, how you carry yourself, and then the content that you put out there, how it's colored, how it looks, how it's edited, how it's this and that. It's just the world that we live in now. So if the visual and the branding game isn't up to snuff with the music, it's not about the music anymore. It's a whole total package. So I am trial by fire, learning as we go, but it's a fun experience getting to figure it on out.
What do? You work full? I didn't know you had a real adulting type job, because obviously you travel so much. Yeah. What the hell do you do? How do you get that in your schedule?
Yeah, so I'm in sales. I sell packaging full time, like boxes.
Okay.
So corrugated boxes, foam, plastic, things of that nature, B2B. So it's intense, but I'm really fortunate where I have a team, at my main office here in Atlanta. And so that way when I'm hopping on a plane on Friday or Thursday, they know, hey, we got to step it up a little bit. I might be a couple hours late to answering emails, but thank God for these things. I'm always on my phone. So that's the thing. It's like, you just always answering emails. You're taking calls, but now the calls aren't just work calls. The calls are calls with management, calls with agent, calls with trying to figure this out with people I'm collaborating with, trying to map the whole thing out. So, it's kind of like I have a lot of empathy for the Elon Musks of the world. When you start one business and then you go and buy a Twitter, it's like, all right, I got to build cars and drill tunnels and launch a rocket. And I'm over here complaining because I need to try and make more music. But it's fun. I wouldn't do it any other way.
You're based out of Atlanta, right? How long are you born and raised there?
Born and raised
is that
Baltimore, Maryland? Shout out to all of my crab cakes and football people.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been in Atlanta about 8 years, and Atlanta, the reason I came here is for work. Atlanta's a cool place. If you're listening to this, you haven't been, because I would say like, I'm pulling this number out of my ass, but I'd say about 3 out of 4 people are here for the same reason. They come because of work. So they come to Atlanta. It's a very entrepreneurial kind of environment. Everyone's hustling. Everyone's trying to do their thing. Everyone is also, doing pretty well for themselves. And it's cool to be around that energy. I've heard that a place like Dubai is very similar, where everybody is out there hustling. Atlanta's like, it's a lot of hustlers, and a lot of people are very not from the area. It's a very transient kind of place.
Right. I'm just happy I'm not the only one that has a 9 to 5 and still trying to do music.
I would say, I think that there's pretty much everybody, the vast majority, because it's the thing I'm learning real quick is like the fees start to go up, but then you need someone to help manage the video editing, the social media. Then you bring agent gets the cut, management gets the cut, and then to have all the content and everything. By the time you get paid for the gig, you got to stretch that very far to live. So it's not easy, but it's just a necessary part of doing it. I'd rather be doing that than spending the money on the next crypto thing or whatever. Where you know what I'm saying? Like I'm still got my money in crypto and all that other fun stuff, but I'd rather be dedicating it towards something that is the passion that fulfills you.
Yeah, exactly. And with that being said, let's get into the backstory a little bit. You said about your day-to-day job. What did you do before you found this music career that you wanted to pursue?
Yeah. So again, 100% commission sales. And I think that's if you're listening to this and you're like, all right, what are some of the things I'm trying to go out there and build a music brand for myself? What are things that I need to know beyond just making bangers? Because I heard it said once, and this really resonated with me. Having good music, that merely gets you a seat at the table. Then once you have a seat at the table, it's up to you to do the rest. And one key part of that is building a team. So you need to build a team. And luckily with the business that I'm in, it's just managing a team. So I have, account coordinators, warehouse staff, labor, vendors, suppliers, customers, all that stuff. And it's managing a team, it's project managing. Building a music business is really no different. It's just that the music is the main asset. And then we're in an attention economy and trying to get as much attention as possible. So a lot of people do that different ways. You could be Steve Aoki, who I just had the pleasure of playing with, throwing cakes and being a crazy guy. That could be your shtick. Or you could use the music as the primary asset. I think that's what a lot of people would want to do. But some people are like comedians. I know one guy who is funny as shit, and he crushes it on TikTok because he makes funny TikToks, and that gets eyes. And then the music supplements that, and then they're listening to the music. They believe in you as the project. I want to follow this person as an individual. They make some dope music. So it's a whole system. It's a whole cake. There's a lot of ingredients.
Well, yeah, I heard you talk about it on another show, another podcast, and I thought you kind of hit it on the head. It's like everyone wants to be introverted. They want to make music, but getting out there, getting out to shows. You talked extensively about that before in the past. I kind of want to, circle back around and, how you got started and that gap, right? From when you got introduced to EDM to actually starting to release tunes, starting to get stuff onto Spotify. There was a gap there, right? Like when I think what you said, 2009 is when you kind of started getting out and about and experiencing
2009 is when I first started to get into the scene, because I'm sure a lot of people have followed a similar path where it's like, all right, you discover electronic music. Most people figure out bass music and dubstep to start. That's how I got into it. And then you kind of find your niche, and then you discover house, and you discover all the different genres. So once I started going to shows, festivals, falling in love with it, doing, so many different festivals, so many different shows, living the life of, I love this so much. You get into DJing, and then, I'm just doing DJing as a hobby. And then it's like, all right, well, what's next? And for me, I had this realization. I was like, if I want to do this for the rest of my life, I could either become that rich guy that's in VIP that has all the hot chicks around him, but they're only there because he's got a bunch of money, or I could pursue the actual passion and actually learn production, do what I want to do, transmute all of these sounds and noises into my head and be able to implement them into the DAW and create something that's going to outlive you. And being able to do that and then get recognition for it, the supplement to that is you also get to, keep going to clubs, keep going to festivals, but this time the bathroom is just a little bit better if you get the artist
Right.
one. So
No, for sure. So, when did you actually start releasing tunes? Like, right? When did you like start started turning from fan to artist?
my first track I put out was in 2020, and I decided to really get into it in 2019. I'm like, all right, I'm done with all the bullshit excuses why I can't learn how to produce. It doesn't matter that I don't know how to play the keyboard. It doesn't matter this. I'm just going to go for it. And once I found a mentor who really, helped take me to the next level, you start to develop this circle of other people that are on a similar path. So I figured out pretty quickly what are the things that I'm good at. I really like sound design, coming up with cool different things, and I got a very good education in mixing. A lot of people fucking hate mixing. So I have one friend that is incredible when it comes to the groove. So, I reach out, you build this circle of people, and when you get stuck in a song or a track, always for me, especially starting out, I don't do it as much, but it's very, very helpful. So I'll just blast it out to my buddy. I'll be like, yo, what's up with the groove? What do I need here? Oh, do the da, 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 da. Okay, cool. That gets the next step, the next piece of the puzzle done. Then I'm like, all right, what's up with the melody? I have my friend who's an incredible melody writer. And so we'll kind of trade. He'll be like, all right, here's what I think you should do with the melody. And then he'll send me some. I'm like, well, here's the ear candy and the mixing that I think you're missing with. So developing those relationships and those friends where you can help each other on a very, it's a fun thing to do, and understanding, all right, my strength is this. And there's so many other people where I'm like, all right, this comes so easy to me, but what comes easy to me comes super hard for other people, and then vice versa. What comes super hard for me comes really easy to other people. So why don't we just collaborate and have those conversations so that we can help build each other's kind of how I've always approached the angle. But yeah, I put my first track out in 2020, and then basically made a big push to like, all right, how do I play the game of, all right, I want to release on this label and then get a little bit on this label. And in techno, it's very, you're trying to make your way to eventually land on a drum code one day. That's the golden opportunity. And so you're kind of just, bouncing around and figuring it out. But yeah, and during that entire time, as I started to put tracks out and get recognition, then at the same time with other producers and other people that I've become friends with, they also throw shows. And they're like, hey, we want to bring you. We have an underground thing. And then all of a sudden, people that you've been talking to for a year and a half, they want to bring you out, or they know somebody that throws shows and they're like, you got to bring this guy. I looked up one day and I'm like, man, I have 9 shows in, 3 weeks. This is like a little mini tour. And then I'm like, all right, I'm going to call this a tour. And then you make the asset, I'm on tour. And then you put that out there and they're like, oh, he's on tour. I want to bring him. And it just kind of snowballs. And then, the most important thing, it doesn't always go perfect, but you always want to show up and fucking smash it, because it would really suck to show up to an out-of-state gig and bomb, because then it's almost like 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards, because you're going to kind of, pull yourself out of that marketplace for another year or 2 years.
Well, that's your thing, right? Like, that's your thing as far as like performance. It's not just about hitting the play button and, okay, hey, these people are going to like these tunes. For you, it's a fucking show. Like, right? Like that is what you put a lot of energy into.
I mean, for me, it's just always been, this makes me happy. This is what I love to do. So that's the vibe that I carry on stage. I'm happy. I'm always thinking like, this is, I'm one of the luckiest people on the planet because I'm getting to do what I want to do right now in this moment. And I feel like people can always feel that energy. I made the comment that there's 2 kinds of people. You got people that are the thermometer and the thermostat. So this is on the dance floor. You got to think about this on the dance floor. I'm sure we've all experienced an empty dance floor. It's not fun. You see that empty dance floor and you're like, oh, fuck. And it just takes that one guy, that one crazy crocodile to step up and just start vibing and start grooving and start really getting into it. And that's the kind of person I would call the thermostat, because they're setting the temperature. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people in life, and I think the same way with my sales job. When you walk into a room, you want to be the person that sets the temperature. Because, like, as an example, you go into a sales call and you're talking to somebody and they're having a shitty day. And the last thing that they want to do is to talk to you for 30 minutes. But if you can channel that energy and take their, super terrible temperature, whether that's freezing cold or super hot, get the fuck out of here kind of vibes, and then dial that thermostat to where you want to sit, and control the energy, then that's the place that you want to be. So similarly with DJing and music, when you're on the dance floor, you got somebody that sets the vibe for the entire dance floor. If they're turning it up, then people are the thermometer. They're reacting to the energy being set. Exactly. And so it's the same thing with DJing. What does the DJ do? He sets the thermostat.
Yep, he sets the mood.
So that's kind of how I think about it. And so, sometimes I get a little bit carried away. I just had a gig where previously I played crossed, and then I went to play another gig, and the room was, about a tenth the size. And I was thinking, I'm going to smash it like how I just did this after party at Crossed. You're like, it's a little bit different when you're playing. That's how, talking about Hardwell, that's why Big Room hits so good, because when you're playing Big Room to thousands of people, it's a fucking vibe. But if you're standing around 10 people at a barbecue and you're playing Big Room, it might not be the same.
Yeah. Well, I want to touch on, I want to go back to what you said was connections and all that and networking. That is super important. We talk about it all the time on the show. But just dive a little bit into that. How do you feel about connections and networking and how important it is?
I mean, the reality is, and it's so funny because, EDM and then techno, all of these small genres, think about what a niche electronic music is compared to the rest of the music industry. It's such a niche. So if you want to extrapolate it out, I take a look at you take a look, oh my God, Hardwell has 1 million followers and Adam Bayer almost 1 million followers. But then you look at fucking, I don't even know, look at Future, you look at anybody and they're like 20 million. You're like, all right, that's what a real pop star is. So we're in such a small bubble already. I say that because in that world, it's so much, who do you know? All of a sudden I was talking to somebody and he was telling me about how Kid Laroi, I'm talking about Kid Laroi. He's got that track with Justin Bieber. And he was telling me the background. I had no idea about this, about how Scooter Braun, who's Justin Bieber's manager, found Kid Laroi in Australia and then pumped a bunch of money into him. The producer discovered him and then yada, yada, yada. It's all about who you know. So in electronic music, of course, you need to basically give the ammunition so that if somebody finds you, they want to sell you. Because they can't turn, crap into,
into gold.
A steak dinner. Exactly. But, I wouldn't want to eat that steak dinner, but you get my point. But yeah, I mean, you got to basically put it out there. And it's the same thing with finding an agent or a manager. You never want to go out and find people. It's just always such a better position to be in if people come to you. So if you're out there doing your thing, you're building it up yourself, and then people notice and they come to you, the relationship is just always going to be so much more in your favor rather than, oh, I got to find an agent. Hey, you want to agent me? Yeah, you seem like a nice guy. Okay, blah, 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 blah. It's the same thing with being in a relationship. If you're going to the girl of your dreams and it's like, I'm going to date you, blah, 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 and they almost feel sorry for you, it could work, but it's just a totally different story if they're coming to you like, oh my God, I want to be a part of this. And then, you know what I'm saying? It's very similar things. There's so many relationships or so many similarities between all these things in life, but yeah, connections are super important, and it's just super important for starting off and getting your first gigs out of state.
Yeah, no, totally, man. I agree. I think that's the biggest thing. Music, I'll be honest with you. I think you touched on it first, and I think Ty, we've talked about it at length. It is on the list of 10, it's fucking 8. There are 7 other things. Because everybody is starting to fucking sound the same. And we're going to talk about that. And I actually want to dive into that right now. But everybody's starting to sound the same. So it's how are we differentiating yourself? How are you building a brand? Why should I follow Sam Wolfe? Right? There's a fucking 1,000 other Sam Wolfes right now sitting in a studio by themselves thinking, oh, this is going to be the next techno banger. Except for the fact they don't have your personality, your drive, you're getting out to live shows and stuff like that. So I think that is the number one thing. And anyone who listens to these shows, any podcast, right, especially EDM stuff, the music, you're 8th on the list, bro. If you don't have those other 7 things, whatever they may be, marketing, connections, understanding how live venues work, you're not going to make it, right? The day of the bedroom producer blowing up, those days are dead. This is the new digital era. So I think that's my biggest takeaway going into 2023 is okay, if you're not on this, understanding what AI can do for you going forward and all of these digital trends, you're going to be a hobbyist. You're going to be a hobbyist. And that is kind of the pinnacle of where you're taking this profession. Sam, I want to ask you something though. So since we talked a little bit about Hardwell, he had a big ultra set last year, rebranding. I mean, the whole bit. Everyone's kind of known about it, talked it into oblivion. And what comes, which was great for Hardwell, that's fine. But what comes with that is the copycat syndrome, where every big room guy, especially underground big room guys, are starting to go to they're rebranding to big room techno, and then that's becoming a thing, and it's fucking awful. It's awful. And I've actually, it's funny because I was doing things like that prior to Hardwell set, and now it's like everyone's sounding the same. So I've actually kind of swung the pendulum the other way, personally speaking, as far as what I like and what I'm consuming now. For you guys on the techno side, you've seen a lot of this. Walk me through this. Give me your perspective of what you're seeing out there from trends, the copycats, and trying to say, oh, I'm a techno artist now because of Maddox or because of what Ollie James is doing.
It's funny you say that because I think that there would be a huge portion of techno producers that would look at me and be like, this dude is a big room techno producer. So it's a spectrum. There's a ton of people that would look at the music that I'm putting out and what I do, and they're like, this dude is barely even techno, if you want to call it. It's like big room techno. So I guess the message that I would say is that, because this is something I've been thinking about a lot, you know, what got you here isn't necessarily going to take you there. So it's always a consistent kind of figuring out ways to continuously evolve and push it a little bit further and push it a little bit further. So that's why, you know, for me, like I'm trying to implement vocals a whole lot more. I'm trying to do things that are a little bit more outside of just another techno banger. Because you know, you're always going to have people like I thought about this a lot. I'm in a weird position because I love the music that I make. However, I make about 132-ish BPM and I make like bangers. Well, you have a lot of the tech house guys that are starting to spin more techno in that 129, 130 realm, but it's got that nice groovy kind of, you know, tech house pattern with a nice groove. And that sounds great. I like it a lot. And then you got the Europeans, which are doing the hard techno thing at 140 BPM plus. So a lot of times I'll look around and I'm like, shit, I'm kind of in an island because I'm not groovy enough. I'm still a little bit too hard for a lot of the American tech house scene, but I'm not hard enough nearly. I'm soft for these other guys. So it's important to be cognizant of all that stuff. And I understand what you're saying about copycat because like now I look at the stuff that I'm doing, you know, years ago and stuff that I'm making now. And, you know, it's like you're always trying to push it a little bit further and always be different and be unique. At the end of the day, you want to make music that you like because if you're copying somebody, then it's always going to have been done already. Now, like, are there ways to, you know, clearly stand out? Absolutely. You know, like look at what like a Zomboy, you know, everyone was like, man, you're the bro step. You're just copying Skrillex and it's totally fine because he's doing his thing. But, and no, you know, there's not enough genres or micro genres to invent the next thing for everybody. But I think that one key piece of advice, which I'm trying to follow myself, is make music that you think is fucking banging. And if you think it's banging and you're playing it all the time and you really fucking like it, there's going to be other people that vibe to you. But at the same time, understand the marketplace because, you know, one thing that I do like a lot is I like groove. And I'm like, I think I need to implement a lot more of that tech house groove with my dark bite. And then all of a sudden, like before, I've had the dark bite. I've had that on lock. I've had the dark bite on lock. I've had kind of like the trancy breakdown thing. You know, I've been doing that, but it lacks groove. And so, you know, in life, we always want to basically set up a new challenge and conquer it. So, you know, once you've done it, all right, what is one thing I don't know how to do yet? And then keep kind of taking it further. So I think that, you know, don't focus so much on it that you're paralyzed and have copycat syndrome. Because like at the end of the day, like I'm just waiting for somebody to put out like a beautiful Avicii-esque happy melody, and all of a sudden happy music and happy prog bangers are going to come back. Who's going to do it? You know what I'm saying? Like when we saw David Guetta come out with the Future Rave stuff with Morton, like that was basically big room with the 2019, 2020, like the new plugins, the new this, the new that, Because the way to sound fresh, what I've found, at least this is just my personal experience, one way to sound fresh is that there's always new plugins coming out, and new plugins have new sound characteristics associated with them, and new ways to distort, and new ways to saturate, and new ways to this, and new ways to that. So staying on the latest trends and even the latest mixing trends, like the mixing knowledge that I have now versus what I had 2 years ago, oh, that's how this shit gets so big and wide. The thing that's interesting you're talking about with the big room guys getting into techno, they have that really big fat fucking mix and that big fat fucking master that they already know how to do. Whereas a lot of techno music is more raw, it's analog, it's coming from hardware. So the technicalness of the mix wasn't so important. And then you have these guys with big production, really, really big mixing engineers, all these other things coming into the game. Well, now all of a sudden we got to step up, if that makes sense.
So would you say that's helped or hurt the techno scene? Because techno in general, in theory, is still an underground, genre, right? Like for the most part, obviously it's moving forward to the main front, but would you say that type of attention on the techno scene has it's a kick for it, or is it now everyone's getting lumped into that? Oh, he's a Hardwell guy or trying to do this.
Well, I'll preface with this. I mean, I really started getting into techno in 2019, so I'm not going to claim to be some sensei. I have a homie who is my manager, and he used to throw raves in Detroit back in 2000. So when I need to get schooled on actual, he actually went to jail for the Rave Act that Joe Biden passed back in the day. So he's a fucking OG.
Yep.
So when it comes to like OG Detroit techno and schooling me on Juan Atkins and Derek May and all of the actual he's introduced me to DJ Pierre, who was part of Future, the guy who invented Acid House. He's been a homie here in Atlanta, and getting that education is super important to understand the roots. But I'm not going to purport to be like some sensei. Because I still myself am relatively new, coming from the big room days that we all came through, and the trance phase, and listening to trap and dubstep, and then getting the tech house fix and bass
So
house.
you don't consider yourself like a techno snob. You have more of a fresher perspective on things.
Definitely don't consider myself a techno snob. However, I totally understand why there are techno snobs, because there's a certain corny factor. And the thing about being an American, this was just explained to me by a good friend of mine, an Australian mate. He's like, "Oi, Americans are fucking corny, aye?" And I'm like, "God damn it, bro. What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, you guys are just in this bubble of like, we run the world, we do it, but it's like one corny motherfucker trying to out corny the next guy. And it's just getting to the point where it's so ridiculous to get attention. You have to be so outlandish." He's mostly speaking from a hip hop kind of scene, talking about the hip hop realm. But he's got a point. Americans, we are cornier. And so you don't want to be like, I'll look at things that I did 2 years ago and I'm like, fuck. I'm still going to be me, but there's a way to dial it in and package the vibe to not be as corny. So I would say that a techno snob, a techno purist, somebody who really, has been doing this from, could be the late 90s, early 2000s, has been in it for 20, 30 years. I understand, because, you're doing something a certain way and there's a scene that represents a certain kind of mentality and something. And then all of a sudden the commercialization comes in and it changes things. So I totally get it. But just to bring your point, to answer your question rather, take a look at Oliver Heldens. Take a look at Oliver Heldens and his acceptance with the Hilo brand by Drumcode and now starting his new label. And in my opinion, absolutely fucking murdering it. He's absolutely destroying it. He puts out bomb after bomb. He's been fully brought into the Drumcode scene because he makes really, really fucking good music. He's a dope DJ. And so, you know what I'm saying? Like, some people may be like, oh my God, blah, 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 blah. But what's interesting is that the last two releases, they got put on the big room charts on Beatport, which was interesting. I don't know what's going on there. But even Eli Brown's latest release, it got put on the big room charts. So something's going on there. I don't know what's at play, but that's kind of, the writing's on the wall of like where things are going. But, in my opinion, more eyes is a great thing. More competition is an amazing thing, because then everybody has to raise the bar. And as long as it's not raising the bar because, I'm Logan Paul and I need to be so ridiculous to get more attention than the next guy, that kind of raising the bar, that goes back to that corny conversation that we just had of like, we don't need to be that corny, but raising the bar and like, all right, everyone's doing instrumentals. Time to put vocals on here. And that working with vocalists and doing that, that's such a different task that requires such, it's music. So I'm all about it. I absolutely love it. I would say this is that I think that Hardwell, yes, he's putting out, harder, more techno with a techno kick, but I think Hardwell would say himself that he pioneered the big room genre and he wants to be a big room artist. I don't think Hardwell wants to be known as a techno artist. To be perfectly honest, if you were to ask him, I feel like I've almost heard him say this before, but he wants to be a big room guy, and he's the master of it. He can, because it's an amazing show, and when you're playing to thousands of people, big room hits different, and there's always going to want to be people. I'd be one of them that like I want to see a vibe like that. Like, unfortunately, I was at Ultra, I didn't get to make it there because I was somewhere else, but like that's watching that live. It's just like there's still is nothing like it. You know what I'm saying? So it's just going to be a lot harder for a new big room person to come up and rise the ranks.
Exactly.
That's kind of where it's at.
Well, I want to get into the Detroit scene and all that. Have you played in Detroit?
Yeah, a couple times. The first thing I did was a small private event, and then I came back and I did a pre-party for Movement. I forget the venue, but it was on a Thursday, and that was dope. And then my homies based out of Detroit, Deepfake. If you never heard of Deepfake, they're fucking dope. You want to talk about branding and visual? These guys got it on fucking lock, and they're super awesome dudes behind the masks. Great human beings. So that's my plug for them. They're dope. Check them out because they live VJ while they DJ. But anyway, they're dope as fuck, and they brought me out to play Magic Stick. But yeah, the Detroit scene is it's interesting. You would think it's like some mecca, but I would probably argue that LA, New York, and even Chicago are probably bigger in techno right now than Detroit, just because of size and scale.
I mean, yeah, really, you only have a few venues in Detroit, like Magic Stick, like you said, Electricity in Pontiac, and then Movement Festival, which I've never been to, and I really wanted to when I lived there.
It's crazy to me though that everything started there, right? Like we think of EDM as like overseas, and it just kind of trickles down effects that we get it here. That's like literally the birthplace of electronic dance music was Detroit. Like, so I always have a profound respect because you were talking about your manager, right? He's old school, and I'm a fucking senior citizen at this point. So like going back and it's just so funny how things started off with, we talked about guys like Frankie Knuckles, and it's all, you would think it's European. It actually came from the heartland of America.
Absolutely. And then at the same time, actually in tandem, it's funny because at my day job, one of my clients is a major pharmaceutical manufacturer, and somebody at the plant, he's an OG Detroit guy, but he also was living in Chicago. And so we chop it up all the time. And really, it was two things going on in tandem: the Detroit techno scene with the Chicago house movement. And those kind of two things were really, bubbling up, and that was the birthplace here in America. Europe obviously picked it up and took the ball and ran with it. I read, if anyone here knows Nakadia, I got to hang out with Nakadia for a little while, and she gave me her book, and I read it over a course of multiple flights. And she does a really good job of touching on that, being one of the first female DJs over in Germany and whatnot, and her experiences and everything. And definitely, Europe, we owe them for taking the ball and running with it. But yeah, Chicago and Detroit, the birthplace.
Yeah. So, okay. So now fast forward to current times, we're seeing what melodic techno is really big overseas. What are you seeing now? You're touring the country. Obviously you've toured overseas as well. So you're an international guy. You've kind of played both sides of it. What are you seeing that we're getting to trickle down now here in America, at least in the club scene where you're playing? Like, what are we getting? Where's our trends at?
I mean, this is purely my opinion, but I think look at John Summit and Off the Grid for setting the tone. And so what we are finding more, so there's two different things, and that's why I've noticed that, like, man, I'm kind of like on a fucking island. The hard shit is really starting to pick up steam here. I like the hard shit, and we have a crazy scene here in Atlanta. my homegirl Yira, who runs Twisted Lines, shout out to Twisted Lines, bringing some of these, Trim and Shlomo and a whole bunch of different hard European acts. People are just getting into the and obviously that's been popping off in LA and New York for a while. But the hard thing is picking up in its new, subset, its new micro genre. But the tech house scene, which tech house, in my opinion, has been, the king since Big Room died off, relatively speaking, is now moving into that groovier kind of techno where the lines are being blurred. And I think that is going to be where, because people, in general, they want to go harder and harder and harder. And then things get so hard that soft and deep, it kind of resets. So the next logical progression of, John Summit, I would probably argue, is the hottest American act in dance music right now, hands down. He's starting to delve more into that techno. And at the Caverns, he was just dropping dubstep, which is dope. Love to see it. It's smart. It's very smart. It's very smart because you're bringing in all the wooks. I said it before. I'll say it again. Wooks love techno, but yeah, I would look to that to see where it's heading, because it makes sense, because the groove. We like the groove here. We like the tech house. We like the groove. We like Miami. We like space. We like that kind of vibe or whatever. But with the techno, where it's just a little bit faster, a little bit more rolling, a little bit more oomph, a little bit more 303 or whatever. That is definitely what I think is going to be popping up more and more and more. I would say when I was over in Europe, the cosmic techno thing, that kind of in between techno trance, the stuff that I produce, was being eaten up like candy. It's getting a lot harder. So all of my friends are saying, like in Germany, like people aren't really playing below 135. But yeah, so that's still kind of like legacy over there. But super hard techno and tech house that's now kind of techno with that groove, I think, are the two things. And in the United States, the latter, being led by John Summit and his label, is going to be popping up big time. And definitely watch out for Hylomatic and what Oliver Heldens is doing with that label,
especially with Space 92 and Filth on Acid too.
Exactly. I got to hang out with Matthew not too long ago. Super nice guy, super dope dude, and he's got some groove in there too. It's not so much groove in the hats like with Tech House, but it's more groove in the shots, if that makes sense, in the bass shots. That kind of gives the groove. That's like the Hilo way, the Space 92 way. The groove comes in the bass shots and then the placement of them. Whereas with the Tech House thing, it's more in that hat pattern.
Now, who would you say is some of your influences when it comes to the techno?
I mean, it's got to throw it up to Umek. I mean, the man who's thrown me so much invaluable information. You'll hear a lot of my newer stuff, and in my opinion, it's just rocking on a different level of just like where the intricacies that probably, I don't know, 90% of the people listening, especially off a phone or off laptop speakers, you're not going to notice. But in the club, it's just got that extra bite and that edge. I listened to the shit that I was putting out, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and I'm like, but we all start somewhere. So definitely, obviously, Umek, and he's just a pioneer in his own lane, because this man invented like the kick of all kicks. There's one thing that is a sure bet: if you're going to go to Vegas, the low end with Umek is fucking rocking.
Oh, it'll melt your fucking face off. But yeah, no, hearing that, it's funny because hearing that stuff live, like you said, most of the people who consume their music, it's going to be on their phones, laptops, whatever.
It's club music.
That's why it's so important to get out there live, because it almost feels like a different genre, right? When you're actually physically experiencing it. But yeah, so when you're talking about like the low end of the kicks on Umek, I totally resonates with me, because that's,
and it feels so foreign now because it was so long ago, going back, it's 2023, almost 14 years since like the first EDM show I went to. But I remember like trying to explain to friends in high school and then in college, like the reason this is so dope. Oh, you got to see it live. You got to see it live. Because once you go to a show live, it's like, whether or not you're fucked up on drugs or whatever. But like,
yeah, no,
once you go to a show, once you go to a show live, and then you take those core memories and then you transmute them into the listening experience on the phone, on the whatnot. So like, I don't want to say I'm like super good at it, but I like to think that I can listen to a mix on a cell phone really quick. And I can pretty much tell from like the waveform from this. I'm like, okay, the kick's a little bit too soft, blah, 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 blah. And you're able to think like, okay, how is this going to sound live? What are the problems with the mix off those different, listening, shitty. I use my shitty in-ear plugs to listen to stuff all the time because it's just a good way to kind of like, get this different listening experiences. But yeah, seeing it live, it just changes everything. It changes.
Well, it changes your productions, right? I mean, like you come back, and for the guys who haven't done this stuff live, like they're just kind of like status quo on Ableton because we like Ableton here.
Whatever.
Ty, I'm always digging it. The adults use Ableton, but no, but
Are you a Logic or FL guy or?
Yeah, I'm FL.
Gotcha.
We have this debate all the time on the show, and he always loves to roast
all the
me.
time. I'm roasting you because we got another Ableton guy, but like, it does change your production values and how you view things, because ultimately that's the end goal, is to play live, or it should be, right?
Yes.
For the guys that are trying to quote unquote make it. So understanding what would then work live.
And one piece of advice I would give, because all right, so this helped me a lot, was after going out and playing my music live. Then when you're back in the studio, you can close your eyes, listen to it, and be like, okay. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I give it the test where it's like, would I be embarrassed to stand in front of a group of people and play this? If the answer is yes, go back and make changes. And you're closing your eyes, like, this is gonna fucking hit. Like, I'll never forget when I made the drop of 7 a.m. I'm like, and then I'm just like, I'm like, okay. This is gonna be fucking sick. And I rode that way for a hot minute, and that helps. If you're not able to do that yet, what you need to do is look at your idols, the people that you want playing your music. Then, you know what I'm saying? Like if you're making progressive house, look at Eric Prydz. If you're making trance, look at Armin van Buuren. Look if you're making big room, look at Hardwell, and be like, okay, if I'm Hardwell, what needs to be coming out the speakers for me to be like, this is a fucking bomb? And then make music not for them, but make music for you with the intention of them loving it as well. And that should hopefully help give you inspiration, because what I've found personally, this just might be my personality, I operate way better under pressure. So when I have a goal of like, okay, this track, like I have a collab coming out with Umek that's coming out next week. It's going to be, biggest collab with the biggest artist.
Yeah, dude. Whoa, hold on. Let's walk it back a second. That's big fucking news. Like that's a big deal.
Big one. It's big one. Yeah, it obviously just came naturally. It was only a matter of time where he's really taken me under his wing and really helped develop the sound and whatnot. And as we're throwing ideas back and forth, it's interesting to see how like I'll put stuff super aggressive, and then he has the project file, and then he's trimming it down and coloring it as a certain way to fit his aesthetic and his vibe. But like, he always would be like, man, there's super attacky Sam Wolfe sounds. And I'm like, what do you mean attacky? And he's like, man, you need to clip these. I'm like, I didn't even understand the difference between a limiter and a clipper not too long ago. So, shame on me. But super solid mixing advice that I just got. Obviously, you want to think of your track. I always like to describe it as like mixing like for a doorway. You have so many frequencies and sounds that you're going to try and cram through a door. So the more shit you try and cram through the door, the more crowded it's going to get, the more muddy your mix is going to be, and then the lower perceived loudness, the less dynamics and all this stuff. So obviously you want to EQ and you want to carve out frequencies where everything can sit nicely into the mix. Then you want a gain stage so that the loudest thing is going to be your kick and your bass. For me personally, I always start a track with the kick hitting at negative 12 dB, and then mix around that and just throw a limiter on and boost like 8 to 10 dB so it sounds normal. And then when this track is done, I just turn the limiter off and it's good to go. So obviously all that's a given, mixing 101, but you need to think about the transients as well. And this was something that I didn't really understand. So it's like, well, think about it, because he started mastering some of my stuff. He's like, well, think about it like this. This is your waveform on SoundCloud. Okay. Here is the highest waveform. In techno, this is going to be the kick and the bass. It's pretty much always going to be the kick. And this is the transient. The kick, it has the highest transient. Well, if you have this super aggressive rah sound with a super harsh transient, and that transient peaks here, well, here's your kick, and here's that rah sound. Well, I only have this much room to push the rah before the transient supersedes that transient, and then the limiter is clamping down on that rah sound so that then the kick isn't going to be as loud, the low end's not going to be as loud, it's going to clamp down on that. So what you need to do with a clipper is you can clip these aggressive sounds, and you can take this much off the transient, and it doesn't change the characteristic of the sound at all. So if you clip all this initial transient where it's just this big spike that you're clipping off, then you have the rest of the body of it, and now all of a sudden, here's the transient of that sound. Well, it can be pushed and mastering all the way up here, so it gives more dynamics and all that stuff. It's kind of like the fourth dimension of thinking about your mix, which is super important. And that was a concept that was just relatively new to me, a year ago, not even. So, anyway, all that being said, I don't even know what we were just talking about, but that's
yeah, this is great. You're just going off. Have you done? I've already lost the original question. That's fucking out the window. Have you have you done like walkthroughs and stuff like that for folks, or like small groups, or hey, this is how I made this? That's the typical.
I did one on ZenWorld's channel. ZenWorld was an inspiration from day one. That one's out there. But I watched that video and I'm like, fuck. I was talking about panning things left and right. And I'm like, well, I forgot to mention that you need to like EQ it a little bit differently to prevent phasing and yada, yada, yada. But there's a lot of good information on that one. But obviously that was 2 years ago. So there's so much more new information. It comes back down to content. Like I should be putting way more shit like that out. But yeah, like there's been some local Atlanta meetups where I've talked to, like aspiring producers and given mixed out advice and things like that. And then I'm always trying my best to answer DMs, and people send me music all the time, and I try and give those tips. And then of course I always share as much sauce as I'm learning it with my homies that share their sauce with me. So it's just a big stew of sauce. I got a little bit, they got some sauce, and then together we're making bangers.
Well, EDM in general is known as like a loving, sharing type. There's limits to that, but for the most part, the perception is that is the case.
One thing is, so if you think about it, I've gotten to talk to a whole bunch of different promoters that have clubs and throw events. And so when they'll pick me up at the airport and we're hanging out and yada, 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 one thing I hear all the time is like a lot of guys are like, yeah, man, I have all kinds of different parties, hip hop parties, this kind of party, blah, 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 blah. So many fights.
Yeah.
Like there's so many drunk people fucking strutting on each other and getting into fights. And he's like, man, there might be a lot of kids doing drugs, but never any fights at these underground techno EDM parties.
You can't be that guy.
Those aren't my words. That's just me going out into the field across the country. And this is what club owners and venue owners tell me. They're like, yo, no fights. And of course I wouldn't imagine. Why are you getting into a fight? You know what I'm saying? Like, why?
You cannot be that tough guy getting in a fight at a fucking EDM. Like that is like.
It is always funny to see the mosh pits. And then you see like, the ultimate alpha Chad who's like got the shirt on, he's yoked as fuck. And he's like, trying to, and then I feel like you're just waiting for like the rave bay with the pasties on and the assless chaps. And she's like the prize and the ultimate alpha Chad. I had one experience at Moonrise where I was like a little bit out of my mind. So I was overanalyzing things, but I was during Snails because Timmy Trumpet was on next. And I was always a Melbourne bounce guy back in like 2012, 2013, 14. And Timmy Trumpet, this is one of his first times in America. He's playing at Moonrise, Baltimore, my hometown. I got to fucking see Timmy Trumpet. So anyway, Snails was before him. And I'm just standing there when I'm looking at this mosh pit and I'm seeing these like, the ultimate alpha. It's like they're seeing who's going to be, it's all fun. But even in situations like that, after, it's like, I'm going to mosh and you're going to mosh and whatever, it's not like anyone's angry. Everyone's super all about it. And then instead of, Donkey Kong with the Princess Peach, you get the Ray Bay with the Ray booty.
No, dude, that's what I'm saying. I love that type of community that shares a lot. So like you get a lot of DMs, right? You get folks sending you tunes and stuff like that. So you actually give. I feel like people are going to see this and start just blowing your shit up. But you actually, for the most part, you give feedback and stuff, right?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And like it's a lot harder now. It's a lot harder. But I mean, like we were saying before on the thing, like I have my ads team, and they have it dialed in where, man, I'm only spending, like I said, $350 a month on ads because we're trying to figure out what works, what doesn't. And with that, I'm getting 40,000 impressions a day, which is crazy, which is fucking wild. So having that part of the team and being able to like really get it in and like, no, it's not just people, in India and China or whatever, it's all over in Europe and all that stuff. But the point is, yeah, lots of traction, lots of people coming in. And I always try and make a genuine connection because like, if anyone's taking the time to listen to what I'm putting out there, the least I can do is talk back as much as possible. It is getting a lot more difficult now, but yeah, I mean, the
That's
least,
amazing. Tyler, try doing that with fucking Drake. Let me know how that works for you.
Right.
You ain't getting that anywhere else. Only in EDM are you going to get that.
Well, I want to piggyback off what you said, because you said love and positive vibes and all that for EDM, but us knowing the big room scene and stuff and the underground scene, and it could be kind of toxic. What about the techno scene when it comes to? I know techno's underground, but what about the underground artists and all that? Is there a lot of toxicity in that scene and
Well,
stuff?
I wouldn't call it toxicity, and and to be perfectly candid, going back to my comment about like how a lot of techno people would view me as like probably not even proper techno, you know. But I would think about it like this: brand is so important, and so who are you going to associate with? So if your brand and your authentic self is a certain wavy vibe, you know, and then you're looking out and you're like, we'll go to the extreme. If Steve Aoki is a performer throwing cakes into the crowd and that's made him millions of dollars, God bless, no hate, and you're Michael Beebe and you are on a completely different wavelength, it's not toxicity so much as who am I going to align my brand with? So basically it's important. And that even goes as far as like bigger artists, you know what I'm saying? Like for me, there's people where I've tried to collaborate and they're just not going to, because what's the value? It's always a trade. And in general, like I've explained this before, and this was explained to me and it makes total sense. You normally have people that are big, but they're not that cool. And then you have people that are super cool, but they're not that big. So as an example, with Carnage and his Gordo rebrand, he is really fucking big, but in the melodic techno space, he wasn't really cool yet. So he's making the plays where he's collaborating with certain people. Like you put that track with Korolova and yada, 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 where it's like, we're cool, but we're not as big as you. So we're going to trade our cool points for your big points, and he's going to trade his big points for your cool points. It's always an exchange. So I wouldn't call it toxicity whatsoever. It's just business. And if you're not getting the results that you're looking for, which I'm in a position where, I got some corniness to me, and I'm not going to change who I am, but I understand that there's a way to dial it in and package the branding in a better way. And we're always learning how to do that. So if I'm trying to collaborate with people that I think would be great, and they're like, it's just not the right time yet, what they're politely saying is that you don't fit the branding, or you're not at the level where it's not a fair trade. So I wouldn't, basically, when you take that input of data, don't get upset. Don't take it personally. It just is what it is. And then if you can take it, handle it, adapt, evolve, and then move forward, I think that's the sign of a true professional, and of whatever you want to call it, an artist, professional. So that's how I would advise handling stuff like that.
Yeah, I meant a little bit more like Discords and people just talking shit too as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no. I don't use Discord. I do have a Discord. I'm on the Cold Harbor one, but yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, to be honest. I guess I would just to be blunt, I don't have time. I don't have time to get into too. I like gossip every now and then. Some people who know me, some of my friends here in Atlanta, I love some juicy local Atlanta tea every now and then at the local clubs, whatever. But yeah, I just don't have time to do it because I'm too focused on building something that's bigger than me. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and you have a real fucking job, man. Dude, we see a lot of cats sitting around like 18, 19 years old just running it. And I'm like, dude, gainful employment is a thing. But fucking so okay, let me ask you this. You've achieved a lot. We've kind of touched on that a little bit. What are you looking to do, man? What are some of your goals you're trying to let's take we'll use sales terms, right? Short-term, long-term goals. What are you looking to achieve this year, and then like say 5 years from now? Because you've talked a lot about legacy stuff, music that'll outlive you and such and forth. And I've discussed that with Ty in the past too. So let's talk about 5-year goals, and then after you're gone kind of stuff. Like, what are you looking? What's the end game?
Yeah, I mean, 5-year goals. I think a good way to describe it would be, I want to shake the snow globe. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to shake the snow globe. I want to shake the snow globe. I want to shake things up. I want to do something a little bit different. That a good example of that, Fred again. That man shook the snow globe. How did this guy blow up? Look at his past collaborations before just looking at Rumble or anything like that. Like this guy's collaborating and producing some like serious like music, you know, like actual like music, and that's kind of what you eventually want to do, but that takes a whole nother level of talent, and that's I think is the end goal for a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, you look at someone like Calvin Harris. Like this guy was able to take Big Room and turn it into something so much bigger by making like records, you know? And so that's kind of the long term. For me, of course, always trying to figure out what's the next move to get more visibility and then to continuously evolve the brand. Because where I'm at now compared to where I was, I'm super grateful, super happy, but there's so much, further to go, and there's so much more to do and to just keep going. And I just want to do it and honestly make real genuine connections and not do any, I don't want to say corner cutting, but like not do any soul selling in the process. Just do it in a way that like I want to do, and then be smart about it and just keep pushing it and try and take it to that next level where the production's getting bigger, the bookings are getting bigger, the audiences are getting bigger, and all that stuff. So that's kind of where my head's always at, and then trying to make the right moves that aren't compromising the sounds that I want to make. So like I don't want to be stuck in this bubble. I don't want to be making the same shit that I was making this year 2 years from now.
Interesting. Do you have any like venues that you've targeted? Like, look, man, I'm gonna play here. Festivals. I know everyone's kind of like Tomorrowland and so forth. Do you have something that you've pinpointed? And you say, you know what, man, that's where I'm going to be.
I would love to get on that ARC lineup very soon. I would love to get on ARC. I would love to do that. In Chicago, are you guys familiar? It's a beautiful festival. The folks running it, it's a great group. It's a great group of lads there. I would love to do that one. I'm super grateful for the folks over at Seismic Dance Event in Austin. They put me on twice and had me out at the concourse, and that was an immensely helpful thing for the brand this past year, getting to share the stage with Sama Abdulhadi, then Oliver Heldens as Hilo, then Enrico San Giuliano, and then Charlotte DeWitt. And, it just, I've said this in sales, like as a young guy, it's really important to try and collaborate with the heavy hitters, because when you go into an account with them, you get to see how does this guy who's crushing it, how does he think? How does he interact with clients? How does he interact with customers? And then that becomes your reality. It's very hard to land when you don't even have a map, It's very hard to land somewhere where you don't even know where you're going. So when you get to be, going back to the sales example, when you get to be working with people that are crushing it and you get to mirror some of those really nice traits that work for them and then turn them into your own, that's going to help cut a lot of time out and figuring out a lot of mistakes. Likewise, in the music space, when you get put on these stages and the festival circuit starts to become your reality, that really helps kind of elevate you to that next level. So those kinds of things are always super helpful, and super grateful for the ones that have put me on so far. So shout out to Andrew and Kelly over at the concourse. They're doing the Lord's work in Austin, Texas. It's a crazy scene.
Well, I know you don't have much more time, so I'm just going to ask this question.
It's already been an hour.
Yeah, it has been.
Wow.
Yeah, we're plugging along, dude. No, it's been fun talking to you.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, we've done tutorial stuff. We've talked business out here. A 401k came up earlier. I mean, this has been like a fucking full, like adult, well-rounded podcast today.
We're adulting, baby. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. Rapid fire.
I want to ask, what are some tips and tricks you can give to these younger DJs and producers that are trying to get into the game? You've gave a lot of them already, but what are some more that you might have?
Yeah, one thing I haven't talked about a lot, which is something I'm still trying to figure out, that was laid down to me recently, was the importance of the visual side of things. Again, the visual side of things is almost just as equally important as the audio. And us as music producers, we are, it's so funny. I just had this comment, one of my really good homies that I'm collaborating with, super talented singer, great brand, guy named Driftwood, is Australian, crazy lad. He's a crazy guy with an amazing voice. And he's like, man, because we were in the studio, he was over at my place, and he's like, man, it's insane because you take this song so seriously where you will remix it down and you'll mix it down over and over to perfect this thing over and over and over again. And then you're about to put out this video edit, and it's like, you're just crapping it out. It's like, why don't you put that same level of that into the visual side of things? You would be unstoppable. And I'm like, damn, you're right. So that's something that a lot of guys, you look at a label like Mousetrap. This has been explained to me. I got several homies on there, and like they care just as much about the visual kind of branding of an artist, just as much as the music. Like if you don't have that side locked down, then I've been told that you're not going to get signed there. So think about that. That's super important. Yeah, other tricks, other things. Get a clipper. I don't know why it took me so long to not start clipping stuff, because I go back and I check the peaks of so many of the sounds that I'm using. I'm like, oh shit, no wonder my track sounds quiet, because this transient is fucking popping up so harsh, and just I need to clip that thing. Definitely.
What do you use? What clipper do you use for the guys that are sitting there
right
like,
now,
all right.
standard clip. But to be honest, I've heard the G clip is like really good, and there's one by a clipper's a clipper, but I've heard the G clip is really good. I use standard clipper right now by SIR Audio, but also Split EQ by Eventide. Split EQ. Are you guys familiar with this plugin?
No.
It's okay if not. Basically, Split EQ is fucking amazing, because what it will do is you can basically boost or reduce the transient and the click, and then you can boost the body of it, the non-transient. So you can solo just the transient and then pull that down, and you can boost the whatchamacallit, the I don't know what the not transient is, but the rest of the sound that isn't the transient. So Split EQ by Eventide is fucking awesome. And then for a quick little transient shaper, Drum Shaper by DS Drum Shaper by the same guys that make RC Color. I forget who makes it, but those three are really solid.
Well, I like that you brought up visuals and all that and stuff, because look at Kashmir. He used to do like movies, and he used to make it a full experience.
Exactly, and he can keep making Big Room until the dawn of time, because that's his shtick, and he can tour India and Asia, and they pay in Asia. I don't want to jinx it, but maybe by the time this comes out, I don't have a contract signed yet, but it looks like verbally I should be going to Taiwan pretty soon.
Dude,
And,
Taiwan. Yeah, I got some buddies out there. That club scene out there is absolutely fire. It is fucking gas out there.
Yeah, I'm hoping to find out.
Yeah, Ty Narskis and these boys that we were talking to, dude, they absolutely throw down. You're gonna have a good time. Something tells me you're gonna have a real good time out there.
Well, any last thoughts before we sign off today, guys?
Yeah. I mean, in general, I would just say that don't compare yourself to other people, because that's a fucking trap that I fall into all the time. And you're gonna figure out pretty quick, like, who's a genuine dude in the industry, and then who some people just don't want to fuck with you. And I'm the kind of guy, I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I love human interactions and just being friendly. Don't take it personally if people don't want to fuck with you. They might just think you're a little bit too corny, and don't be anything other than yourself. But do understand that just because you're being yourself, you can always dial it in and do things a certain way, a little bit better, a little bit cooler, a little bit more tasteful. Always think tasteful. I feel like that's if you want to kind of, in my opinion, one of the reasons that Big Room, the bubble of Big Room burst, it no longer became tasteful. When Animals came out, that shit was tasteful, in my opinion. I remember in 2012 hearing like ID, and it was like in an audience set, or we went to see Audien open for Above and Beyond at Echo Stage in 2012, and I heard Animals live, and it's literally beep 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 dee 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 dee. But like, that was tasteful because it was minimal in the sense that it's just a big long tail kick with a simple kind of big reverby sound. But that's not tasteful anymore. So just try and be aware of the trends of what's tasteful, and then take tastefulness and then turn that into your own thing, your own way to be tasteful.
I love it, man. You, Sam, dude, I appreciate you coming on. I know you're busy, especially this time of year. I know you're going to be out in Southern California, right? I think next month.
Weekend, when this comes out, the 29th, Vegas, Disco Pussy, After Charlotte the Wit, the unofficial after party with my homie Weska on drum code. Super good producer and a cool fucking dude. We've been at Movement in Detroit. After that, I got Elsewhere in New York with Umek. Then after that, we got Exchange LA, debut there. I'm playing with Space 92 and Umek. And then we go down to Nova San Diego. It's going to be incredible. I come back that weekend to play Deborah DeLuca here in Atlanta at my residency here at Domain. Then I go to Germany, Cologne, Void in Berlin, Kit Kat Berlin, go to Turkey for Ankara, back to Germany for Love and Trance out by Hamburg, back to Turkey for Sonance Festival. Come back. It's looking like Seattle, Philly, Chattanooga. Things are lining up. Super grateful and just need to find time to keep making music. Fuck.
You're repping us Americans well, man. We appreciate
Right,
it. And like I said, we'll be watching. We'll be watching the whole way.
We got to keep in touch.
Oh, for sure. And like Rob said, I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Appreciate you guys for having me. Thank you so much for reaching out. You guys are G's, and I love what you guys are doing here. And don't stop, because this kind of information, it's like, yeah, it's not getting played on, Good Morning America, but these are the kinds of podcasts where will affect 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, a handful of people, and it'll fucking change the course of everything that they got going on. And that's why we're on this planet, to fucking help people, change lives, and just fucking be good human beings, and just, have a good time.
I couldn't agree more, man. So, ladies and gentlemen, like always, you could go and follow Robert Go at Robert Go on Instagram. You could go and follow me at Young Ty on Instagram. And you could follow our guest at Sam Wolfe on Instagram. And we'll see you on another episode of Voices of the Underground next time. Peace, guys.